Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from Wealth Management focused on advisors, personal well-being, and healing. I'm Diana Britton, Executive Editor of Wealth Management, and in this podcast, we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast. And thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being. And today's guest definitely counts on that score. Her name is Carolyn Armitage. She's the founder and CEO of Wealth Management Consulting and RA Circle. Carolyn, welcome, and thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Diana, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, a lot of folks in the industry know Carolyn. She's had an impressive career in the wealth management industry. Prior to starting her own consulting business, she served as head of Thrivent Advisor Network, the firm's independent channel, for about 2 years. And prior to that, Carolyn served as a managing director at investment bank and RA consulting firm Echelon Partners. She's also the former head of large enterprise business management consulting at LPL. Just had a great career. And Carolyn recently produced a featured documentary called Journeys, an educational film about the power of psychedelic therapy and the ethics behind the use of psilocybin, a natural psychedelic compound found in over 200 species of mushrooms for healing purposes. And the film was inspired by her own personal experience with psilocybin to find healing from her childhood trauma. And so for many years, Carolyn kind of kept that trauma to herself while putting on this mask, working in these senior corporate roles in the industry. So, Carolyn, I want to talk about that a little bit. I know that childhood trauma that you experienced, you kind of locked it up and compartmentalized it. And several years ago, you had a moment where, when the memories kind of came flooding back. So tell me about that moment. Take me back and kind of what led to that.
Yeah, while I compartmentalized this trauma and tried to lock it away and pretend it didn't matter, the memories did haunt me, including
Mm,
images, and that was sometimes even daily. And so, what led to me seeking additional therapy was after my mother passed. After her burial, we went to a late lunch that day, and me being myself, my husband, and all my kids, which I have 4 children, and one of my sisters invited and brought the brother that had sexually abused me to the
mm,
restaurant, and they even had the gall to join tables with ours. And yes,
mm,
my sister knew about the sexual abuse,
mm,
and it just didn't matter to her. And so I was sitting next to one of my other sisters and turned to her and said, "It's really surprising that I turned out as good as I have, considering my upbringing." And that triggered something in my body where I just started bawling. And this
mm,
wasn't weeping from grief or sorrow that I just buried my mother. It was a whole body crying, uncontrollable experience, which I later learned is called flooding, that my
mm,
body was flooded for 3 solid hours. We've all had a good cry once in our life, if not more. This was 3 solid hours. It was literally a whole body experience. It wasn't the loss or grief. My body had just taken over, and it needed to expel this sorrow that I had been living within me from this early childhood sexual abuse. And
mm.
so that next morning, obviously I slept very well after such a big cry, wearing sunglasses to breakfast as we went out, and I recognized it was time to heal. It was time to quote unquote get over the sexual abuse I had from a small child.
Yeah. And you said, I think you said you were about 8 years old when that
Yes.
happened to you.
Yes.
Tell me about what your childhood was like. Give me a little bit of a picture. I know you grew up
Yeah.
with a lot of brothers and sisters.
Yes. I am the youngest of 7 children, and the next youngest sibling, so starting from the bottom up, my next youngest sibling was a brother who was 6 years older than me, and then the next one was 8 years older than me, who was my abuser. And
Mm,
so all the others were a year or 2 years spaced apart, much older than me. Didn't really know them that much growing up. It was a chaotic household with so many people. At one point, we had 9 of us in the house with only 1 bathroom for most of my
wow.
life. Um,
Wow.
and it was also that environment where kids were free range. We didn't really have that term back then, but this is when where kids would go and do whatever, whenever, with whomever, and you just come on when the porch light turns on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was a very lonely, I would say, environment where because of the disparity in age ranges, I often felt like an only child. And as I look back, I don't know if that was wishful thinking, where it may have felt safer for me to imagine that I was an only child, but I know I've spent most of my time on my own, which allowed me to let my creativity run wild and definitely filled my time with lots of creative endeavors. Since this sexual abuse happened while my brain was still developing, the abuse ends up imprinting a hyper alert on switch, if you will, in my amygdala, which
Mm,
is a permanent neurological response. So as a child, I learned that family wasn't safe, that love doesn't mean safety, that I could really only count on myself, take
mm,
care of me, and that the world was a dangerous place. And so my entire view, the rest of my life has been fear based and safety based. So I set up a huge safety net or wall around me because of this neurological flaw that I had during my developmental years. Many of my memories actually are blacked out throughout my childhood years because of that experience. I do have some great memories. The best ones are at our lake cabin, which was about an hour away from where we lived in Minnesota. And that was because the abuse didn't happen there.
yeah. Yeah, when I was a kid, it was like our parents weren't around that much, didn't care when you just kinda got on your bike, you rode around the neighborhood
Mhm.
and went off with your friends by yourself, and like you said, you kinda came home for dinner at night or whatever, but what was your relationship with your parents, and were they kinda similar, just not around too much, or
Yeah, it was very much a similar experience. My parents were much older than me, right? My mother was 38 when she had me. And so my dad also traveled a great deal for work, very unemotional, detached, perhaps because they were part of that golden generation, perhaps because I was the seventh child. And oof, that's a lot of mouths to feed and kids to raise. I can imagine they didn't have a whole lot of energy left by the time it
yeah.
got to me. My mother also had 3 miscarriages where she could have had 10 children.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
they definitely had a hard life. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that you mentioned that in a way you blamed your parents for what happened. So how did your parents react, or how do you where do you see that they are partly to blame?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, according to therapists, when children are abused, there are often signals, right? So, when I was abused, I had no words for what was going on. I had no idea what it was. I didn't even
Yeah.
really know it was wrong because I just didn't know what it was. But when kids are abused, there are often signals or signs that something's wrong. Their behavior changes in some way. And so when parents are paying attention, they will pick up on these changes and investigate. My parents were pretty checked out,
Mm.
uninvolved, if you will, and apparently didn't notice. I even remember like peeing my pants at school, hoping a teacher would help me. And
Mm.
like they helped me and got me cleaned up, with the school nurse helped me, got me a change of clothes and all that, but nothing changed. So I did blame my parents for not noticing and not protecting me and not being more involved in my life growing up. Through the psilocybin therapy, I was able to forgive them. But I had sought CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, to determine if I should confront them, particularly when my father was on his deathbed. Should I bring this up to him and see if he even knew? And in several sessions with my therapist, we concluded no, to not confront him. It wouldn't change anything. And he was a very unemotional, detached person as well, likely had childhood trauma himself because his relationships or lack thereof. So my father did pass without me bringing that up or confronting him. And many years later, my mother and I were speaking on the phone, and she was complaining about this brother who she didn't know but had sexually abused me. And she kind of stopped and paused and said, "Carolyn, I know what my issues are with this brother, but what do you have against him?" Because I
Mm.
kind of cut her off and told her, "Mom, I really don't want to hear any more about this person." And
Yeah.
so I told her about the sexual abuse, and
Okay.
she didn't know. And she also responded better than I could have imagined, right? This is a kind of golden era, not super emotional, uninvolved mother. And she responded with such warmth and care. She really heard me. She saw me. She believed me. And several months later, without me even asking or bringing it up or anything like that, she actually ended up cutting him out of her will.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad that she reacted that way. I'm sorry that they didn't pick up on it when you were younger. So I know after you had that kind of crying episode, you sought somatic therapy,
Mm.
which explores how the body expresses deeply painful experiences and it applies mind body healing to aid with trauma recovery. Tell me about that therapy and how did that go?
Yeah, thank you. So when I got back home, I researched a variety of therapists. Sadly, my prior therapist had passed away from breast cancer, and so I needed to find a different one.
Mm.
And found a great lady who is a somatic therapist and also specializes in childhood trauma, because I really needed this help healing both my mind and my body through this early childhood trauma and development. I ended up having numerous autoimmune diseases.
Mm.
And once I understood the profound impact this childhood trauma had on my early development and how I've been carrying those scars, how it's impacted my life, my relationships, my sense of self, I really felt compelled to get to the other side as quickly as I could. And normally, talk therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, will take several years to help people heal from childhood trauma, if ever.
Mm.
And the length of time from when the abuse occurred to when you're dealing with it, the more time that has passed, it has a multiplicative effect for the healing process and creating new habits. So, my therapist let me know that it could be decades, like literally another 40, 50 decades to think and feel my way out of this, to let it go. And I didn't have 50 years of healing, right? Today I'm 58. This occurred many years ago, but still I was in my early 50s, mid 50s, and I didn't have another 50 years to be able to heal.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think people often misunderstand if they haven't gone through this type of trauma is why you couldn't just let it go. And that's what I had tried to do, but your nervous system doesn't let you. The trauma is a part of me. It was embedded in my nervous system where I didn't know how to let go of it. And therapists can't tell you how to let go of it because it's in your central nervous system.
Yeah.
To just let it go and forget about it often means just sweeping it under the rug, which is a destructive coping mechanism I learned growing up and how I behaved for decades. And that ends up manifesting itself in very unhealthy ways that were, quite frankly, blind spots to me.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to live like that.
Yeah.
You want to move forward and try to find healing. I think that the therapist might have brought this up as a way to get through it and find some healing in a bit faster way. It was the psilocybin. And so how did you discover psilocybin and start thinking about that as a treatment?
Yeah. So as I started working with her and fully understood why things were happening the way they were in my mind and body, first off, I didn't want antidepressants again. I had been on them here and there throughout my life, and they really flatten the lows in life, but they also suppress the joys. There's weight gain, your sex life goes out the window because your libido's gone. I just didn't want to do that. So I really did a ton of research on alternatives, and I read as many transformational stories like mine that I could. This wasn't as out in the open as it is today, especially this year, but there are many websites with many stories, and I dug deep. I read books, I watched any films that were out there on the different types of psychedelic medicines out there, and I did research all of them. I literally created a spreadsheet, and what I did is I settled on the mushrooms or magic mushrooms, shrooms as they're called, exclusively for my healing because they are all natural and they're not chemically created. If maybe inferred from this, I grew up in the drugs are bad era, right? Like in the
Hmm.
dare culture.
Yeah.
And so entering this world of psilocybin was completely new to me. I'd never used mushrooms before. And so I really wanted the most conservative approach. And I felt like the mushrooms would do the least amount of harm. Maybe they would work, maybe they wouldn't, but I wouldn't be harming myself because they are a natural plant medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, just to give a little bit of background, psilocybin or magic mushrooms are naturally occurring and consumed for their hallucinogenic effects. They are psychedelic drugs, which means they can affect all the senses, altering a person's thinking, a sense of time, and emotions. Psychedelics can cause a person to hallucinate, seeing or hearing things that do not exist or are distorted. And the key ingredient in magic mushrooms is psilocybin. When psilocybin is taken, it's converted in the body to psilocin, which
Mhm.
is the chemical that with the psychoactive properties. And so I know Carolyn took a heroic dose, which is 5 grams or more, which is I think it's the highest dose. And there are studies that show that the drug can be used to alleviate anxiety, depression, and distress in terminally ill patients. And just the 2 hour film that Carolyn produced, it features a series of intimate stories following individuals who have been navigating trauma, mental health challenges, and personal transformation supported by psychedelic assisted treatments. And the film covers how psilocybin has helped military veterans and soldiers heal from post traumatic stress disorder. And it also addresses its use by individuals with childhood trauma, like Carolyn's, and those at the end of life as well. And I think that it's been used to help folks at the end of life not have so much anxiety about it. And so the film really educates viewers about the growers and scientists who measure psilocybin, as well as the journeymen who guide people through the experience and ensure that they don't harm themselves. Carolyn, I guess I wonder if you had this 6 hour journey when after you took the heroic dose. And tell us, I know you had someone guiding you as well. Walk us through the experience. What was it like?
Yeah, it was like the best control alt delete experience you could have to kind of reset yourself. I was aware and awake the entire time throughout the 6-hour journey. It's not like you're passed out or something.
Yeah.
I'm fully present. I could talk, I could drink water, I went to the bathroom, I could ask questions, I even made a few jokes along the way. This is a inner trip. They call them Journey, thus the name of the film, Journeys. You wear a eye mask so that it isn't a party trip. You're not looking and seeing a bunch of weird stuff out in the room or with people or whatever. You're looking deep inside yourself. And it really is a journey into the depths of your subconscious. I think it's important for listeners to recognize that the mushrooms are a teacher and they will find where they need to go within your subconscious. You do set your intentions before you drink. It's a lemon tech tea made from the mushrooms. The lemon tech helps to pre-digest some of the mushrooms so it's not as upsetting on your stomach. And so I started off with a lower dose of 3.5. As that starts to kick in, my therapist asked if I wanted more to get to that full 5-gram heroic dose. And I was very open to it. I knew the healing I wanted to go in for. I knew it was a natural plant medicine, so this wasn't going to make me crazy or anything like that. So I said yes. And so I drank the rest of it. And I felt very calm. It got, now, granted, I was wearing an eye mask, but it got kind of dark, which I know that sounds weird, but I felt like I was in a dark elevator shaft, if you will,
Hmm.
going down into this depth of my subconscious. It kept going to different levels and it kept getting darker and darker. And at the very deepest level, or the bottom floor, if you will, I was in it. I was in the room where the sexual abuse often happened. And this time, instead of laying there frozen or unable to do anything, I was able to be there and hold my inner child from
Hmm.
behind, around across the shoulders, across her chest to protect her, pull her away. I was able to be there as the adult I needed in the room and in that time in my life that I didn't have. I was literally holding her, yelling at the top of my lungs, "No more, get out." Some expletives in there, like
Yeah.
over and over again. I think that was probably very cathartic. And what that did is put a new imprint on top of what actually happened in real life. I think it may be important to note for anybody who may be considering this type of therapy, I didn't fully actually relive the incest, but I was there and present, and I created this new imprint on top of it. So I know a lot of folks that are considering this are frightened about reliving or having nightmares of reliving the experience. I can't say it wouldn't happen to them, but I know for me I was present, I was in there, but it was an opportunity to have that adult protect me.
Yeah.
So there's this concept in therapy where we all have an inner child that is where you have unevolved emotions, don't know how to express yourself. Think of it like toddler terrible twos of you act out when you don't have another way of expressing things. And then we have our adult self that it is the more rational side of our brain that think through things and respond differently as opposed to reacting. It was so lovely and loving to be able to protect my inner child, to go back to when I was 8 years old and re-imprint what should have happened back then.
Yeah.
And then as I started to come back up this elevator, so to speak, or that's how it felt for me, it was physical, where I was on a bed in a room, my therapist in the corner, just kind of taking notes for what was going on with me. He didn't interfere. He got me water when I needed it. The coming out of that experience was physical, where I was like rolling around in bed, not intentionally. It was what my body wanted and needed to do to help release this trauma. And as I rolled around in bed, my hair was all over my face and I just couldn't brush it away no matter what I did. And so I asked the trip sitter for a hair tie to get the hair out of my face. And that was essentially a physical manifestation of the lack of clarity that I had throughout my life. I just
Mm.
couldn't clear it. And then as the mushrooms were wearing off, my hair was out of my face. I was calm. And without even thinking about it, the first thing I said was I forgave my parents. They didn't know. They didn't know any better.
Yeah. Wow. That's an incredible experience. How did that experience change your life?
Yeah, so afterwards, my husband was there. He picked me up. We went for a walk. It's helpful to go out in nature, apparently, after this. And I was so calm emotionally and physically. The colors seemed brighter. I felt deep love. I felt this is gonna sound a little hippy dippy trippy, but I felt like I was one with everything. You could feel the connectivity of the trees and plants and flowers and the people that we saw, that we are all in this together and on this same planet together. I felt peace and safe in my body for the first time in my life.
Wow.
It truly felt like world peace. If
Mm.
everybody could take some of this, maybe not a heroic dose, but it really was so calming. At the same time, I also felt awake or online kind of for the first time ever in my life. And I know that's probably a weird statement, but because of my interrupted childhood development, I my nervous system built up this fight or flight, always on system where I couldn't let people in. I didn't feel like I could allow or accept help because I didn't feel worth it. So I would never ask for help. But if somebody offered help, no, because I had learned I could only rely on myself. I had such shame and guilt for what happened growing up and coming out of this experience. And still today, several years later, I have zero shame of what happened. I fully know it wasn't my fault. There was nothing I did wrong. I was 8 years old. I had no words for this. For whatever reason, I couldn't do that before this journey. I had this
Mm.
guilt and shame, like I should have known better or something, even though I was 8 years old. Coming out of this, for the first time in my life, 100% truly love myself and I can trust other people. My husband and I have been married over 20 years when I went through this. And while I knew he loved me on the surface, I always felt like he might leave me because I didn't
Mm.
feel like I was worthy of love. And coming out of this, completely trust him. It's such a mind blowing shift of perspective and innate way of being, right? I used to be more selfish, have more of a singular view. I I was more detached to life. That's why I kind of feel like I'm now awake or online because I didn't want to feel emotions. Emotions were like too much for me. So I really would disconnect in a lot of situations. Just mind
Yeah.
blowing, I have to say. It was something like nothing else I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing and providing so much color about what the experience was like. I think there's a lot of skepticism out there and a lot of misconceptions about psilocybin and magic mushrooms. And you know, I think that even just talking to you has opened up my mind to it because you do think that it's like this hippie type
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
drug that you take at a party or something.
Yep.
But and the film is really provides education around the ethics of the drug and how it's really helping individual people who have gone through trauma and who are near end of life, right? And folks who have been through things like you. Tell us a little bit about the film and what inspired you. I know that you approached Chris Kramer, who
Mhm.
is the director of the film, with this idea. And so, what kind of inspired you to approach him?
Yeah, the experience, as I mentioned, was so life-changing for me and my husband that we wanted to bring the awareness of this type of alternative therapy and education to others, right? So I was in my 50s before I did this. And wow, I wish I had done this when I was 18 or 20.
Mm,
Why didn't I know about this decades earlier? Right. And so rather than writing a book, I guess because we knew this director, we had admired his work, trusted him. And we were having a pool party, very LA style. We were having a pool party and he was over and we said, "Hey, what would you think about producing a film about this for awareness and education, talking about the ethics of it, talking about the pros and cons of licensing this, right? So it's available in certain states, cities, counties, and more are coming on each day. But a lot of this is still very much underground.
mm,
And so the film is really this deep dive. It is a full 2 hours for the rapidly expanding world of psilocybin therapy. And I did a heroic dose, this large dose. Folks also use microdose or a small little dose that you would take sometimes on a daily basis that doesn't give you such a big experience like I had. It's small, minor changes over time. And
mm,
people are using this for depression, end of life care, that reconciliation and resolution, so they're not afraid of dying. As you mentioned, we dive into the science, the ethics, the structure of the practice of being a trip sitter and things like that. And so we just wanted to help messaging because there's many stats that will state mental health as the number one health issue globally. And this isn't
mm,
just a US evolving science. Other countries are also rapidly changing their laws and adopting psilocybin psychedelic therapy. So we just wanted to help inspire others, have people know there are alternative ways if therapy is not helping, if antidepressants aren't helping you. This worked wonders for us, and maybe it could for them.
yeah, I just really appreciate you sharing your story. And I think after you took this went on this journey, you kind of wanted to share your story, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're very open. It seems like you have no problem because tell me a little bit about that. You want to help others, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, Diana. I grew up with this awful shameful, dirty secret my whole life. When I was in college, I told one girlfriend, because she had shared with me about her sexual abuse, and so I told her. I
Mm,
told one best friend, and I didn't even tell my husband until we were married like 7 years or so. We were in this argument or whatever, and he actually said, "You're sounding like someone who was sexually abused." And I broke down and I said I was.
mm,
And that was when I had started therapy the first time. So that this is my second marriage, and we had been together for 7 years, or married 7 years, and so I was very several decades in, and I admitted it to only 2 people before my husband. It was this shameful secret, and now I am telling the world, because that shame is 100% gone, the guilt is 100% gone. This is we're recording in April, it'll be released in June, but April is Sexual Awareness Abuse Month, or
mm.
Sexual Abuse Awareness Month, I should say. And I think there's comfort and there's inspiration in hearing other people's stories. And gosh, I wish I knew of this decades before.
Yeah. Wow. I'm afraid we're just about out of time, but I'd like to thank my guest, Carolyn Armitage, for being on the podcast and sharing her story. This is very hard stuff to talk about, Carolyn, and going back deep into major trauma that has impacted your life deeply. And I just really appreciate you being so open and vulnerable about it. And I'm glad that you found healing, some healing. I'm sure it's a work in progress, but just thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. I appreciate you helping to share this experience with others in the industry. I know the wealth management industry has a lot of type A drivers, entrepreneurs, workaholics, the classic overachievers. And some of this may be helpful to others that kind of didn't realize some of the things that are going on. There is that dark side of success, the dysfunction
Mm,
that can be within us. And if this can help even just one person, it's all worth sharing. And I will say that once I've gone through this healing process, it's super easy to share versus
mm,
I never would have 10 years ago. I would have been so embarrassed by it. It's amazing how many people, sexual abuse, depression, suicidal thoughts impact people in society. Once somebody opens up and somebody else chimes in, since the article went public and the film went public, I have had so many people reach out,
mm.
thank me, and share what they went through as well, or sometimes their healing journey as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing this to the industry.
Yeah. And if you'd like to reach out to Carolyn, if you have any questions for her, or just want to reach out, you can reach her at Carolyn at wealthmanagementconsulting.com. You can also find her on LinkedIn, and you can find more information about the film at journeysfilm.com, excuse me. But that's the website for the film. You can also get it on Apple. If you have a struggle and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of wealthmanagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.